of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange, never-world of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
We are always the observer. But sometimes we identify with the event so much so that we even lose the aspect of the observer. That's why the materialist gets totally lost and thinks that we could do without the observer.
The physics data tells us that an object itself is really a simplification for what we call out there. One is particularly when we're looking at atomic and subatomic particles or atomic and subatomic matter in any form. What we find is how we go to look at it, what we choose to examine it with, actually changes the properties of what we observe to be out there.
Is this the observer, and which is so intricate to understanding the wacky, weird world of quantum particles and how they react? Is this, then, the observer? And even though we cannot have a quantum field without the observation of scientists who have gone there, who have uncovered it, layer after layer after layer, they're all observers. But not one of them agree conclusively on all points in the field, because they are perceiving the field mathematically from different angles of perception.
We don't know in quantum mechanics how to hook ourselves as observers up with the world. We don't know how to treat ourselves as observers as just another part of the physical system that we're describing. The only way we know how to do quantum mechanics as it's traditionally formulated is to keep the observer outside of the system you're describing. The minute you put him in, you get all these paradoxes. And we're forced to say things in quantum mechanics like, look, the book is doing what it's doing because of quantum mechanics, and I see that because I'm there and I see it, and you better not try to analyze that second part of the sentence in terms of applying quantum mechanics to it, because it's going to break down. That's why there are these two separate laws of the evolutions of physical systems. One that applies when you're not looking at them, the other that applies when you are. But that's crazy.
There's no way that we're ever going to mathematize or put into mathematical formula this very act in which a conscious observer comes up with the answer. People say, oh, the measuring instruments, the recorder records it, and there it is. It's on the tape. It's recorded. You forgot one part of the equation. Somebody has to look at the tape. And until somebody looks at the tape, it ain't recorded at all.
When you are not looking, there are waves of possibility. When you are looking, then there are particles of experience.
A particle, which we think of as a solid thing, really exists in a so-called superposition, a spread out wave of possible locations. And it's in all of those at once. The instant you check on it, it snaps into just one of those possible positions.
It's easy to generate situations where the equations of motion will predict that, say, the wave function, the psi of a certain basketball, is uniformly distributed all over the basketball court. We don't have any idea what a state like that would look like. According to the law of quantum mechanics, that's supposed to be a state in which it fails to make any sense even to ask the question, where is the basketball? That is, according to the law of quantum mechanics, asking the question, where is a basketball whose psi is uniformly distributed over a whole basketball court, is the logical equivalent of asking about, say, the marital status of the number 5. Okay? It's not that you don't know the answer, you don't happen to know whether the number 5 is married or a bachelor. It's that the question somehow is radically inappropriate in the first place. The number 5 doesn't have a marital status. There's nothing there to ask about. And similarly, a basketball whose wave function was uniformly distributed over the entire basketball court would not have a position that could even coherently be asked about. Now, the crux of the measurement problem is precisely that, although the Schrodinger equation predicts under certain circumstances, circumstances which we basically know how to reproduce in the laboratory, that basketballs should go into states like that, states where there fails to be any intelligible fact, any sensible question even about where they are. And yet, when we go look at the basketball court in situations like that, we invariably see either a basketball over here or a basketball over there or a basketball over there. The fact that we see the basketball in some specific location, as opposed to seeing it in some science fiction state that we can't even imagine what it looks like, where there fails to be a question about what its location is, the fact that we always see it in some definite location is an explicit violation of these equations of motion, and it's exactly there that the measurement problem comes up.
You observe, things happen. When you don't, they don't.
Superheroes use superposition, with the world being potential strips of reality, until we choose. Heroes choose what they want, being in many places at once, experiencing many possibilities all at once, and then collapsing on the one. The question is, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Your own mind is creating multiple possibilities in your subconscious. The superpositions of possibilities are in your subconscious. I mean, you may be consciously aware of them, but they exist, I think, in superposition of multiple possibilities, which after a while will collapse to one or the other.
Project or plan into the future or cast a thought ahead of itself.
Nice shot.
But the great-great-granddaddy of wacky quantum weirdness is entanglement. If time reversal symmetry destroys the notion of time, then entanglement crushes our experience of space. Two objects, two electrons created together, are entangled. Send one to the other side of the universe. Now, do something to one, and the other responds instantly. Instantly. So, either information is traveling infinitely fast, or, in reality, they are still connected. They are entangled. And, since everything was entangled at the moment of the Big Bang, that means everything is still touching. Space is just the construct that gives the illusion that there are separate objects. Are we far enough down the rabbit hole yet?
You now can see in numerous labs around the United States objects that are large enough to be seen by the naked eye, and they are in two places simultaneously. And you can actually take a photograph of that. Now, I suppose if you showed a photograph, they'd say, oh, great, here's this nice blob of colored light, and I see there's a, bit of it over here, and another bit of it. So you got a picture of two dots. What's the big deal?
Superposition is pre-detection. What I was speaking about in the film is post-detection. Now, under normal circumstances, a single object, once it has been detected, is in just one position. However, there are states of matter that have been created now in which objects can be in multiple positions simultaneously, not just 2, but actually as many as 3,000 positions. The first of these objects were called Bose-Einstein condensates. And they are single wave functions, meaning they are single particles. But even though they're a single wave function, the wave function has multiple positions. And if you say, well, look right in the chamber. You know, you can see it right there. Oh, I see 2 things there. You say, no, that's not 2 things. That's one thing. It's the same thing in 2 places. Tricky point here is that it's still a single wave function. It's not 3,000 separate wave functions. It's one wave function. So it's one particle. I'm not sure that people's jaw would drop about it, because I don't think people really believe it. And I don't mean that people say, oh, you're lying, or oh, the scientists are confused. I think it is so mysterious that you can't even understand how amazing it is. One particle in 3,000 different locations.
Now, if you were to weigh one of them, would it weigh 1/3000th?
Well, you can't weigh one of them.
Why?
Because it's one particle. It's just, it's one indivisible particle.
But if it's in different locations, can't you put a scale under 1?
No, it's inseparable. It's not a set. This is the tricky conceptual part, that it's not 3,000 separate parts.
Even though it looks that way.
Right. You can look at it, and I mean, you can't actually see the one with 3,000, but you can look at the simpler ones, the ones that are 2 or 3 or 4, and you can see, as I say, if you go onto the web, you'll see photographs of these. You'll see these little dots floating in space, and these are the different parts of one object. They're not separable. It's not 4 different objects or 6 different objects. It's one wave function. It's one object.
That's a real brain fart, isn't it? Because when you think about it, you just, well, wait a minute, no, they're like here, here, here. So it's obviously 1, 2, 3.
No, you can't, and you can't pull one away from the others. If you try to pull one away from the others, the entire thing will just disappear. And then furthermore, you know, you've seen Star Trek and whatnot. Beam me up, Scotty.
Beam me up, Scotty.
So it all seems sort of, oh, well, you know, what does that really mean? But you've got to really stop and think about what that means, that it's the same object and it's in 2 places at once. And people tinker in the lab and they get angry about things and they have lunch and they go home and they lead their lives just as though nothing utterly astounding is happening, because, of course, that's how you have to go about it. And yet there is this completely amazing magic sitting right in front of your eyes.
We took 2 simple black boxes like this. Inside is a very simple electric circuit with a few diodes, oscillator, EEPROM, some resistors and capacitors. Basically, that's it. We wrap one in aluminum foil. We put it in an electrically grounded Faraday cage. The other we set on a tabletop around which 4 very well qualified meditators, highly inner self-managed individuals sit. And they go into a deep meditative state. They cleanse the environment. They make it essentially a sacred space using their mind cleansing procedures and their intentions. And then one of the 4 speaks the specific intention for this device. The intention is to influence a particular target experiment. Might be to increase the pH of purified water by 1 full pH unit, or to decrease the pH by 1 full pH unit. We've used these devices on all those experiments and have been robustly successful. In the meditative process, then after one speaks the particular intention, it's held various ways by the four for maybe 15 minutes, and then so be it, it's let go. And then a subsidiary intention is stated to seal that imprint into the device. We take one of these devices with its aluminum foil, we put it in a soft package, we put it in a FedEx packet, we ship it 2,000 miles away to the laboratory we were using up in Minnesota. And as soon as it arrives there, it goes into its own electrically rounded Faraday cage. The next day we do the same with the control. The experiment is running, and basically then one just takes the device out, sets it beside the experiment within 6 inches to a foot, and turns it on for a period of time. That's it. Now, we learned over some period of time that there was another factor. We found that the use of these, we call them intention imprinted electrical devices, the continued use of this somehow conditions the space to some higher level of symmetry. And we start getting new phenomena. That is, the devices work. That is, the pH, which is normal, starts rising 1 full pH unit, if that was the imprint, or starts dropping. If you go 1 full pH unit or beyond, you're dead. I mean, that's what it means to a human.
REG machines, random event generators, are electronic tosses of the coin.
One type of random number generator experiment that's been conducted many, many times, hundreds of times, over the past 4 decades or so, since around the 1960s, has been a random generator that only produces sequences of random bits, zeros and ones, like flipping coins. And you would simply ask somebody to press a button, it would produce 200 bits. And you would ask them to say, well, try to make it produce more 1 bits than 0 bits. And when you take the entire body of literature, all of the hundreds of experiments that have been done, you can ask a single question. Did it matter that people were trying to push it towards ones or push it towards zeros? And the overall answer is yes, it does matter. That somehow intention is correlated with the operation, with the output of these random number generators, such that if you wish for more ones, somehow the generators produce more ones.
So when they talk about in quantum physics being a completely arbitrary and random process, what they're not accounting for is the extraordinary effect of human thought, of human intention.
When the O.J. Simpson trial was going on, lots of people are watching television because of the courtroom drama that was unfolding. And Radin intuited that there must be a lot of intention going on at the time when the courtroom drama is strong. So he hired a bunch of psychologists who kept track of the courtroom drama. At the same time, Radin was studying the behavior of random number generators. But then Radin found that whenever the intentions were strong in the courtroom, that's when the deviation of these random number generators from randomness becomes very high.
This leads naturally to wonder, are people affecting the world of reality that they see? You betcha they are. Every single one of us affects the reality that we see, even if we try to hide from that and play victim. We all are doing it.
Just tell me where you are. Okay, good. But hurry, will you please, because these models are giving me a headache.
10 minutes.
In the molecular structure of water
and what affects it. Now, water is the most receptive of the 4 elements. Mr. Emoto thought perhaps it would respond to non-physical events. So he set up a series of studies, applied mental stimuli, and photographed it with a microscope.
For
one sample of water, we drop about 0.5 cc's onto each 50 petri dishes. Then we take those 50 petri dishes and freeze them in a freezer at minus 25 degrees Celsius for about 3 hours. We take those frozen samples into a refrigerator that is set at minus 5 degrees Celsius, where a microscope with a camera is set up. There we take photographs of each of the 50 water drops individually. We first take photographs of water that we did not put any information in. Then we take the water with information and do the same procedure just described. We take those before and after photographs and compare the differences. When we projected the feeling of love and thanks to water, it made the most beautiful crystal. At times like this, I think water is at peace.
This first picture is a picture of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And this picture is the same water after receiving a blessing from a Zen Buddhist monk. Now, in this next series of pictures, Mr. Emoto printed out words, taped them to bottles of distilled water, and left them out overnight. This first photograph is a picture of the pure distilled water, just the essence of itself. These subsequent photographs, as you can see, are each different. This is the chi of love. And we move along here to thank you. And you can see where he taped that to this bottle here. But if you read Japanese, you already knew that. Now, Mr. Emoto speaks of the thought or intent being the driving force in all of this. The science of how that actually affects the molecules is unknown, except to the water molecules, of course. And it's really fascinating when you keep in mind that 90% of our bodies are water.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
One of the most interesting experiments with random event generators occurred when it was really out of time. Some of the Princeton investigators and some of the other ones decided that they would try to see whether or not you could affect a random machine after it had run. So they converted it, instead of having a computer with a visual screen, they had a computerized situation that was audio tapes. And they had it with clicks in the left ear and clicks in the right ear. And they already played this with nobody listening to it, so that it already ran. They put that in a vault, and they then gave the tape, the already run tape, to a participant and said, take it home, I want you to listen to it, and I want you to make more left ear clicks than right ear clicks with it. Send your intention to it. So the person did. They handed back the tape, and they played it, and lo and behold, and they played the one in the vault too, and they discovered that they were both the same, and they both had more left clicks than right clicks. So what was going on here? Well, it wasn't as though the person who was the participant had actually affected it at the moment he was listening to it. His thoughts and his attention had moved back down the timeline and affected it at the moment it was generated.
Most people don't affect reality in a consistent, substantial way because they don't believe they can.
whatever way we observe the world around us is what comes back to us. And the reason why my life, for instance, is so lacking in joy and happiness and fulfillment is because my focus is lacking in those same things exactly. If we're victims, we should ask ourselves, have I a victim mentality? If I'm continually meeting misfortunes and accidents and tragedies, maybe it's because my mentality is basically attuned to accepting that this is the way life is, and so it happens. Now, why can I not achieve those things? Fundamentally through lack of focus.
The average person loses their attention span every 6 to 10 seconds per minute.
When one wants to focus, intent, you want to be a singleness of mind. That's why some of the old occult teachings teach people to focus on a flame, a match flame, in fact, so that you learn to bring your attention into a very sharp channel so that the energy density becomes greater.
The mind is structured in layers, just like the universe is structured in layers, from superficial to profound. And if we use the mind at a very superficial level of ordinary thought, we have very limited power. We can barely move a speck of dust across a tabletop without using our hands. So weak can consciousness be. But at the deepest level of consciousness, consciousness creates universes.
But we always wonder, don't we? When we wish for all of those, to be able to heal with the touch and to raise the dead and to manifest a loaf of bread in our hand. And we always wonder why we can't do that, but we can never ask a question that we don't already know the answer to. And the answer is because we don't believe we could do it, and it interferes with our agenda of our own personal addictions that define us. We have never had enough time to care for anyone else other than our own emotional addictive needs.
Hey, how was the shoot? So. Your boss called. He's worried about you. Amanda, I want to thank you for letting me stay here. I know I'm a bit much sometimes and that it's been tough after Bob and all. And you've just been so wonderful. I mean, I make a mess and, well, I clean up afterwards, but it's not really your style.
Sometimes I think you make me sane.
Me? The day I make someone sane, they're in trouble. Anyway, I made you something as a thank you gift. Open it. I went through your pictures and picked my favorite ones. And it took me forever because there's so many good ones. That's for all the wonderful photos you will be taking. Oh.
I've had a strange day. Thank you.
Why are we here?
If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
What thoughts are made of? Is there a substance of thought?
This is a dream that I'm dreaming. Just as in a dream, you dream different characters can emerge and come out to you and talk to you and meet you and so forth. It's possible to go to another level of dreaming where you can become each of the characters that you dream.
Go backward and forward in time.
Time is relative.
Goes backwards in time, and then forward in time.
Time was not absolute.
Information.
Time reversal symmetry.
Of course, we can go backward and forward in time.
Occurred
Are
when it
all
was
realities in the quantum field existing simultaneously?
The actual event of experience.
There literally are different worlds in which we live. There's the macroscopic world that we see. There's the world of our cells. There's the world of our atoms. There's the world of our nuclei. These are each totally different worlds. They have their own language. They have their own mathematics. They're not just smaller. Each is totally different. But they're complementary. Because I am my atoms, but I am also my cells. I'm also my macroscopic physiology. It's all true. They're just different levels of truth. The deepest level of truth uncovered by science and by philosophy is the fundamental truth of unity. At that deepest subnuclear level of our reality, you and I are literally one.
This gradually led into some notions that there was an invisible connection between everything. Physicists give this a name. They call it entanglement.
As Einstein put it, he didn't believe that quantum mechanics could be true because it required that there be spooky action at a distance. That was his term. And what he meant is that when we have our ordinary sense of the way that the fabric of reality is, it seems like these two places are absolutely in space, they're separate, and never the twain shall meet. But in fact, it's not true. At some deeper level that we can't see with our eyes very clearly, two places in space are the same. They are co-located, coexisting. So if we imagine that common sense, the way common sense literally meaning that your senses tell you about the world, if that's the way the world is actually constructed, then things like psychic and mystical experience don't make any sense at all. Because the whole point about psychic and mystical experience that makes them strange is the sense that there's some kind of connection between what's going on inside your head and things elsewhere in space and in time. So what this view of quantum mechanics provides is a way of framing what these strange experiences are like. And it reframes it from somehow magically information is getting inside my head from signals or forces or something into a different view, which is that in a sense your head, yes, is here, but it's also spread out. It's spread out through space and time. And so when I'm able to get a telepathic impression from somebody at a distance, it's not because I somehow jumped out there and got it, but because at some deep level, my head and the other person's head are co-located.
We become entitled all the time when we communicate telepathically. Those experiences are so striking. I literally can read your thoughts if I become entangled with you. And such things happen. There are distant viewing experiments. There are even experiments now that you are seeing light flashes and your brain potentials picks up the signature of those light flashes, what is called evoke potential, that can be measured in an EEG machine connected to your brain. And I am sitting over there, no light flashes, I cannot see you, and still my brain potentials, because I am correlated with you in terms of intention, I intend to be directly communicative with your experiences. That intention gives me the capability of simultaneously having the similar brain potential in my brain. It was first done by Jacobo Greenberg at the University of Mexico and now repeated by Peter Fenwick in London.
The day should be the sunrise. It should be the beginning of great thought.
I wake up in the morning and I consciously create my day the way I want it to happen. Now sometimes, because my mind is examining all the things that I need to get done. It takes me a little bit to settle down and get to the point of where I'm actually intentionally creating my day. But here's the thing, when I create my day, and out of nowhere, little things happen that are so unexplainable, I know that they are the process or the result of my creation. And the more I do that, the more I build a neural net in my brain that I accept that that's possible. It gives me the power and the incentive to do it the next day.
And we all create our own realities. And we do that because we are the observer. We are each the own observer of our own reality. And each of our individual consciousnesses creates our own individual reality in the most amazing way. My son, Evan, the physicist, says, you know, it's an additive thing. I mean, if I'm holding one reality and someone else is holding another reality. I mean, it's the Super Bowl this afternoon. And the reality that the Eagles are holding is a different reality than what the Patriots are holding. And only one of those realities are going to be the real reality. So there's some additive, and there are interference patterns.
Well, I think if we keep quantum physics and the understanding very simple for the layperson, that our observation has a direct effect on our world. I think if we keep it very simple, then people can get about the business of beginning to practice the skill of observation. See, the subatomic world responds to our observation, but the average person loses their attention span every 6 to 10 seconds per minute. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for our attention span. So how can the very large respond to someone who doesn't have the ability to even focus and concentrate? Maybe we're just poor observers. Maybe we haven't mastered the skill of observation, and maybe it is a skill. And maybe we're so addicted to the external world and so addicted to the stimulus and response to the external world that the brain is beginning to work out of response instead of out of creation. If we're given the proper knowledge and the proper understanding and given the proper instruction, we should begin to see measurable feedback in our life. If you make the effort to sit down and design a new life, and you make it the most important thing, and you spend time every day feeding it like a gardener feeds a seed, you will produce fruit.
We are running the holodeck. We are collectively, it's there, it has such flexibility that anything you can imagine it will create. And you learn, I mean, your intention causes this thing to materialize once you're conscious enough.
Yes, so what is consciousness?
What is consciousness?
Well, consciousness is a very difficult thing to define.
What is consciousness? Where does it come from?
People have been trying to explain consciousness and try to figure out what exactly it is, what it means for us as human beings, why we even have it. On a simple way of defining it is it has to do with awareness, and in particular it has to do with awareness of the self. That's at least how we as human beings have self-consciousness, so that when we look in a mirror we recognize that it's ourselves that we're looking at and not some other person or some other animal.
And do you think science will understand that better than having to handle a hot potato called consciousness that has so much cultish religion, backwater voodoo attached to it?
Consciousness has been left out of the equations of physics in general, as well as quantum physics, for a very simple reason. It's easier to do things that way.
Come on, blink.
This is a good assignment, if you'd see it that way.
What to see? I do. They did.
Oh, God, Amanda. I mean, you live in your past. I mean, everything with you is about what happened. You hate churches. You hate weddings. You hate guys.
Consciousness, we have great trouble defining it. To me, consciousness is a byproduct of spirit entering dense matter. But we have a long, long way to grow before we get to the stage where it is meaningful for us to ask the question, will we know God?
I now present to you Mr. and Mrs. Richard Buck Filipowski.
Experiencing something in the present day that is a trigger to something that is very emotionally charged for us. So now we have become even more disconnected from the reality of what actually is.
The new dream, like a thunderstorm in our brain, and its electrical strikes through our synaptic skies to the earth of our being, creates a chemical cascade in our body that prepares our body for conquest, achievement, a relishing experience emotionally. But we would have no conquest. Indeed, we would have no relishment if we had not first had that hologram and those chemicals that made us, or rather changed us, from being fearful entities into fearless entities after a dream. The frontal lobe is the crowning achievement of the human brain. Frontal lobe. This frontal lobe allows us a distinguishedness to change our minds.
Through the workings of the nervous system and the particular way that it implements quantum effects. Very distinct, specific way, not general, not fuzzy, not imprecise. That it absolutely does open the door for free will being a possibility that does not violate modern scientific tenets, and that's consistent to a certain extent with people's subjective impression that we do have free will.
What separates us from all other species is the ratio of our frontal lobe to the rest of the brain. The frontal lobe is an area of the brain that's responsible for firm intention, for decision making, for regulating behavior, for inspiration. It is the seat of what causes us to take information from our environment and process it and store it in our brain to make decisions or choices that are different than the decisions and choices that we've made in the past. The brain is made up of tiny nerve cells called neurons. These neurons have tiny branches that reach out and connect to other neurons to form a neural net. Each place where they connect is integrated into a thought or a memory. Now, the brain builds up all its concepts by the law of associative memory. For example, ideas, thoughts, and feelings are all constructed and interconnected in this neural net, and all have a possible relationship with one another. The concept and the feeling of love, for instance, is stored in this vast neural net. But we build the concept of love from many other different ideas. Some people have love connected to disappointment. When they think about love, they experience the memory of pain, sorrow, anger, and even rage. Rage may be linked to hurt, which may be linked to a specific person, which then is connected back to love.
Every observation can be looked upon as a quantum measurement. This quantum measurement produces memory. We always perceive something after reflection in the mirror of memory. It is this reflection in the mirror of memory that gives us that sense of I-ness, who I am.
The brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers, because the same specific neural nets are then firing. We know physiologically that nerve cells that fire together wire together. If you practice something over and over again, those nerve cells have a long-term relationship. If you get angry on a daily basis, if you get frustrated on a daily basis, if you suffer on a daily basis, if you give reasons for the victimization in your life,